Welcome to the Dunkirk Primary School Phonics CPD Introduction to Phonics. This video is basic phonics CPD. It tells you what phonics is and the basic progression through phonics and a couple of the main teaching skills. It doesn't include how to plan a lesson, and it doesn't include the Dunkirk Primary School programme. Those are included in additional videos. This video's intended audience is teachers and teaching assistants who are new to or who would like a refresher in teaching phonics. The video is not intended for parents. However, some parents may find watching the video useful in terms of how to support their children. It's important to consider where phonics fits in terms of the whole of teaching children to read. The diagram on the screen is a simple view of reading, first proposed by Gough and Turner in 1986, but most recently known by teachers because it was recommended by Jim Rose in 2006 in the Rose Review. Following the Rose Review, it was adopted as a useful concept by the UK government in 2006. What the diagram shows us, in its most simplest form, is that reading includes both comprehension, which children may be better or worse at, and also their word recognition or decoding, simply lifting the text from the page without necessarily understanding what it means. Again, children can vary from good to poor in this. And this is where phonics fits. So this video is just about the strand of word decoding and recognition, not about the comprehension, but the two need to be developed together to enable children to become good readers. A more detailed diagram that also shows this is the Scarborough reading rope. So you can see on the Scarborough reading rope that we've got the two main strands of language comprehension and word recognition that I showed you. But this diagram turns each of those strands into many different sub-strands which all need to be taught explicitly. You can see the ones there in language comprehension, which are not the focus of this video, and the ones here in word recognition, which are the focus of this video. It's important to know that research has shown that for word recognition, the strands of phonics are the only teaching method that has concrete evidence behind it. Older ways of teaching children to read, such as with searchlights, where they might use the picture, or they might read around the word, or they might carry on reading to the end and see if they could work it out, are based on children needing to guess what the word is and are not backed up by evidence. However, some of those strategies are useful when trying to work out the meaning of a word, but not when working out what the actual word says, lifting the text from the page, which is the focus of our video today. It's important when teaching early reading that we all adopt a phonics first approach. So what is phonics? There are three broad strands to phonics, all three of which you need to know, all three of which the children need to know. So the first is the alphabetic code. So this is the understanding that there are different phonemes in English. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that speech can be broken into. So on the diagram there, inside the slashes, you see a, I, o, a. These are just a selection. Here are some more. B, k, d, g. Again, just a selection. There are approximately 43 to 44 different phonemes in English. It varies depending on accent. Children need to know what's called the phoneme grapheme correspondences. So they need to know for the phonemes they can hear, which graphemes, which are a letter or groups of letters, represent those phonemes. How do the sounds and the letters correspond with each other? How do the letters and the sounds correspond with each other? Children need to know the correspondences as the inverse of each other. So they need to know for any phoneme that they can hear, what letter or letters should they write to represent that. They also need to know the inverse for any letter or group of letters, as we'll come to talk about on a page. What phonemes do they represent? Now, English is a complex language. Part of the reason that English is complex is because English has a lot of irregularities. So in English, one phoneme might be represented, as you can see in those diagrams, by multiple different spelling patterns. One spelling pattern might represent multiple different phonemes. So English is irregular in 2 directions. This is what makes English complex. Your understanding of how the English phonemes map onto the graphemes will be what enables children to learn to read and spell effectively. As well as the alphabetic code, children need to learn 2 skills. The first is blending, which is for reading, and the second is segmenting, which is for writing. Children need to understand that these are the inverse of each other. So a little bit more about each of those aspects. First of all, the alphabetic code. So we have the alphabet. Now you will have noticed there are 26 letters in the alphabet, but I said there are 43 to 44 different phonemes. So already we can see there are going to be some complexities. The next thing we need to do is we need to decide what order to teach them in. Now, what we don't do is we don't start at the beginning of the alphabet and just work our way through. We have to be exceptionally systematic. We don't just pick one and then teach all of the different spelling patterns that link with that phoneme, because whilst being systematic, what we need to do is give children the information in the order that will enable them to apply their learning and to work towards independence. So the first phonemes and graphemes that we teach children are these. O, G, K. Now, the reason we teach this group, and there are other programs that use different groups of letters, but they all work on the same principle. There's a mixture of simple consonants and vowels there that children, by the time they've learnt those 8 letters, can start to build words with. So if I show you what I mean. Just one example there of the word mat. I'm sure you can see others within there. So a little bit more information about blending. Now, blending is for reading. Blending takes print on a page and turns it into spoken sounds and spoken words. So I'm going to show you how to read this word. The principles are the same for any word that you are trying to read. The first thing you need to do is say the sounds. A, t. Having said the sounds in order, the next thing you need to do is blend them together. Much like painting, when you blend the red into the yellow and it goes through orange, you're trying to blend the k into the a and the a into the t. Try to get rid of those gaps in between and run one sound into the next. K, a, t, cat, cat. The key tool that you will use when teaching children to blend are, like I've put those green dots at the bottom, they are your sound buttons. They are a key tool when teaching blending or reading. Blending, just like any other skill, requires practice. Some children will pick it up very quickly. Some children will take much longer. The key is practice. So if we look at the word again, k, a, t. For some children, they will be able to hear those 3 sounds and hear the word cat. For others, they won't, not to start with. And they might need you to really exaggerate the blending. So you might have to go cat to get them to hear that it says cat. For some children, you might need to go as far as cat and see if they can hear the word cat. What you're aiming for eventually is that all children can go from k, a, t to cat, but this might take some time. Cat. The next skill is segmenting. Now this is the inverse of blending, the reverse. Reading and writing are opposite from each other. So whereas reading takes print and turns it into spoken sounds and spoken words, segmenting takes a spoken word and turns it into print. It's important to note that segmenting is not the process of saying the sounds when you are reading. Segmenting is not reading. Segmenting is for writing. I'm going to show you. So your key tool when segmenting will be this, your phoneme frame. So we had sound buttons for blending, phoneme frames for segmenting. So I would like to write the word map. In the complete reverse to blending, I need to take that spoken sound, I need to break it into the different sounds, and then I need to write one grapheme for each phoneme that I said. So in map, I can hear m, a, p. This is the process of segmenting to write a word. At this point, it's important to talk about the use of pure sounds. The way that we say the phonemes now might sound different to how you learnt them when you were at school. For lots of people, when they see this letter, for lots of adults, when they see this letter, they remember at school being taught something similar to m, with an sound at the end. Now you will recall at the beginning, I said that a phoneme was the smallest unit of sound possible in English. In m, we have two sounds, and It's that that we need to try to get rid of to make pure sounds. That is called a schwa, an unstressed syllable. We want to get rid of any unstressed syllables and end up with just the pure sound. This is If you're not sure on the pure sounds, we have a video on our website of me going through each of the sounds. This is where you need to find it to navigate to. It is in the parents section. Now I'm going to show you why those pure sounds are important. So this word says man. If I was to try to read this without pure sounds, I could end up reading m, a, n. And when I tried to blend it together, I would end up with ma'ana. Ma'ana. Well, that doesn't sound like man. And this is why it is important that we have the sounds pure. In man, we can hear m, a, n, man. The other reason why is that you will teach this letter with the sound And if you start saying sounds like m, and children know they will be confused. If you were helping children spell man, and you were helping them hear the sounds, and you said, what can you hear first? That's right, it's m. What next? A. What next? That's right, n. You will find that children will write something like this. It's really important for reading and spelling that we use pure sounds. So if you need any help with that, I already showed you where the video was, but I'd like to give you a couple of tips as well. In English, we have two sorts of phonemes. We have ones like that are stretchy. You can keep saying them. For those ones, it's really important to try to keep your mouth still. Have a go. If you say m, you can feel the shape of your mouth change. And this is where you know you have lost the pure sound. So stretchy sounds, try to keep the mouth still. We also have plosive sounds. Here's an example. Try saying it. You can feel that the air moves in your mouth. We actually have to move our mouth to make the sound in the first place. It's the movement of the air that creates the sound. And if we didn't move our mouth to create that movement of air, we wouldn't be able to make the sound. We can't stretch these plosive sounds out. They are a bit like staccato in music. They're stopped. So for these, trying to keep your mouth still won't work. For these, what you need to try to do is hear it in a word. Try to isolate that one sound. So if you think about the word wet, wet, what does the t sound like in wet? Wet, t, t. That's the pure sound. So for those plosive ones that you can't stretch, you need to try to isolate the sound in a word. So now that you know what phonics is, let's have a look at the progression. Prior to phonics comes some pre-reading skills. Children start developing these skills from as soon as they are born, from hearing speech around them and from hearing other sounds around them. These skills are explicitly taught in nursery. So they go through 7 aspects: environmental sound discrimination, instrumental sound discrimination, body percussion sound discrimination, hearing rhythm and rhyme within spoken language, hearing things that begin with the same phoneme, otherwise known as alliteration. The children don't need to know that word. Voice sounds, being able to hear the difference between a k and a t, between an and an and then on to oral blending and oral segmenting, with oral blending being the skill required before learning to read. If children don't have these skills, they will need to learn them to be able to learn phonics effectively. However, except in rare cases, they should learn these as well as learning the alphabetic code, not instead of learning the alphabetic code. When teaching oral blending, you don't need to be systematic, so long as the complexity of the words are not too difficult for the children. I will talk about that more in a minute. Because the children won't be doing anything with the print, there are no letters involved, it's just what can be heard. It's no harder to hear a word with a long vowel in the middle than it is one with a short vowel. So you can use any words you like, so long as the complexity of the word is not too hard. You might want to choose particular vocab that you're working on. So for instance, if you were working on something to do with night and day, you might want the moon and the sun and the star. If you're working on items from around the home, you might want a fork and a spoon. If you're working on animals, you can see I've got some on there. You could have others or different types of transport. So the game goes like this. I will say the sounds and you have to blend them together orally to be able to hear which word I am saying. So if I said car, you should be able to hear I'm saying the car. If I say sheep, you could say to the children, what did you hear? Hopefully they will tell you the sheep. You could say what did I say? Moon. What did I say? Sun. oat. What did I say? Goat. In terms of complexity, k, r only had 2 sounds. All of the others I said had 3, and they all move between consonant and vowel, or vowel and consonant. If children are secure with that, you might want to consider using words with 4 sounds which have adjacent consonants, like frog, g. Adjacent consonants can be quite hard to hear, so if children have not mastered vowel to consonant, consonant to vowel blending, you should not look to do consonant to consonant blending. If they're secure with vowel consonant, consonant vowel blending, then it's absolutely fine to try 4 sounds. G. You should be mindful that children's working memory might not be long enough to do anything longer than 4 sounds. So words like star, even though there's only 3 sounds, are harder. Star and frog I talked about. So looking at blending for reading, assuming children are confident with hearing k, a, t, and knowing which of those pictures it represents, listen again, k, a, t, and they know that this is the cat, then you're ready to start teaching children blending for reading. As I said before, if they haven't got that, they need to learn that oral skill alongside their standard phonics. Otherwise, the gap will get too big. You can teach the 2 parts, the alphabetic code and oral blending, and bring them together and help them bridge the gap. So it's exactly the same process as with oral blending, except a stage comes first. Rather than me having said k, a, t, when children come to read, they have to be able to say the sounds themselves. K, a, t. And then exactly the same process as the oral blending, they blend that together, k, a, t, cat, to be able to hear the word cat. You'll notice again those sound buttons to help children see the relationship between the print on the page and the sounds that they can hear. So let's have a look at the pre-writing skills. Now what you'll notice is they are exactly the same as the pre-reading skills. In reading, it's about being able to hear the differences. In writing, it's more about being able to say those sounds. If children can't say the phonemes, they are going to struggle with writing. So when we're doing segmenting, we're taking spoken sound and trying to turn it into print. We do this by breaking the word into the individual phonemes and then seeing whether we know what letter or letters we use to write those phonemes down. So if I wanted to segment the word map, I do this orally first. I see if I can say and count the sounds. A, p. There are 3 sounds. A, p. Now children might not hear all of these sounds straight away. They might hear the and the p because these are more dominant. You might need to exaggerate how you say it to help children hear all of the sounds. Map, map. When they have all the sounds, they need to write a letter or letters for each of the sounds that they heard. A. Now, English, as we've already said, is complex. So as you will know, there are 26 letters in the alphabet. As you will remember, at the beginning of the video, I said there are 43 or 44 different sounds, different phonemes in English. Now, this is true for all languages that use a similar alphabet to ours, and different languages get around this in different ways. Some languages use groups of letters. Some languages use accents or markings over or under letters to help the reader know how to say that letter in a different way. In English, we don't use any accents or additional markings. We use groupings of letters. So in some words, we group 2 letters together to represent just one sound. In some words, in some graphemes, we group 3 letters or 4 letters, or in rare cases, more than 4 letters together to represent one sound. So if I show you this word, and we have a look at how to read this word, we can see there is if, and then this sound, sh, is represented by 2 letters. It's represented by the letters S and H, but instead of the letters representing the sounds that we used to know them for, so we used to know S as S, and we used to know H as H. Now they are no longer S and H in this word. They are the new sound sh. If you say the word fish, fish, there are just 3 sounds in fish, but there are 4 letters. 2 letters together represent the one sound sh, and we call that a digraph. A digraph is 2 letters representing one sound. It's really important here that we make sure that we use letter names once we get to this point, if we haven't been using them before. The phoneme S is a sound. It can't be seen. It's not on a piece of paper. Now, children obviously will say, I can see S, when what they mean is they can see the S that represents the sound S. You can't see a sound. But it's really important. In fish, there is no S, there is no H. They are sounds that are not in the word fish. This is a new phoneme. It's being represented by letters that we've come across before, but being used in a novel way to represent the sound sh. Here are some more examples. So we talked about fish. We've got here ch, o, C and H make ch. Here with w, I, T and H make here thin, I, T and H make. You saw before in with, T and H make we could call this a voiced sound, and in thin they make a. They are 2 different phonemes. One is voiced, one is unvoiced. Our mouth is in the same position, but to the children, they sound completely different. They are 2 different phonemes. In the word quiz, we have iz, quiz. In the word hang, we have a, the N and the G make the sound. So as I said, in English, sometimes 3 letters can represent one phoneme, sometimes 4, and in rare cases, more. So let's have a look. Here in the word light, we can see L, IGH represents the phoneme I, L, I, T, light. Where 3 letters represent one phoneme, we call that a trigraph. Let's have a look at this word. EIGH represent the phoneme A. 8, 8. Where 4 letters represent one phoneme, we call this a quadgraph. Now for children, this can be complex enough, but we also need to recognise that the complexities can layer with each other. When there are more multi-letter graphemes within words, this can be harder for children. Let's have a look at this word. In this word, they need to recognise that the TH make O-U-G-H makes or, thought. Now, this isn't just the case for reading, this is also the case for spelling. So, in spelling, we use the phoneme frame, and within each box, we put one phoneme. So however many letters represent that phoneme, they all go in the box together. This helps children learn the relationship between the letters on the page and the sound that they hear. So in the word church, have a go and see if you can hear what the sounds are in church. Ch, ch. Just 3 phonemes, and we represent them like this. Ch, ch. This word is no harder to blend than cat, but it's harder to spell because children need to remember that there are 2 letters representing each of the sounds in that word. Let's have a look at the word below. B, l, o. Let's have a look at the word right. R, I, t. Okay, so we've already started to talk about the irregularities. These are particularly obvious in our long vowel families. I'm going to put a spelling pattern on the screen. This is to represent the phoneme A. Can you say it? A. I would like you to pause the video and see how many different ways you can think of that we can spell that phoneme. Okay, I wonder how many you got. Let's have a look at how many I got. So hopefully you got this spelling pattern of AI because I put it on the screen, like in paint. Maybe you got AY, like in play. A on its own, like in apron. Split digraph AE, like in cake. We're going to come back to split digraphs later. So these are the most common, and these are the ones I would expect most people to get. But you might have also got EI in rain, EY in pray, EIGH, we just talked about in the word eight, AE, like in Sunday, AIGH, like in straight. Some of these are much rarer, but they are all different ways of spelling the long vowel A. We call this the family. And I even missed one, EA, like in break. So I'm going to bring you back to one of those charts that we looked at the beginning. So here is our long vowel family E. This isn't an exhaustive list. These are the most common ways of spelling E. Here we have O, again, not an exhaustive list, but the most common ways in English of spelling O. And here we have OR, again, not an exhaustive list, but the most common ways of spelling OR. For all of our long vowels, there are multiple ways to spell them. We need to be systematic, moving towards children being able to independently apply what they know in reading and writing. It's really important that we all follow a programme, and there is another video about the school programme. But the way this works across all programmes is that one spelling pattern will be chosen to be taught in reception if children are working at age related. So for these, it is the one that you can see first. So the double E for EOA, for O, OR, for OR. Then when we get to year 1, we teach a selection more of the most common ones. Also, the year 1 phonics check is comprised of words from the most common spelling patterns. So we make sure all those are included. And in year 2, we come back to any rare spelling patterns in each phoneme family. This is in our systematic teaching of phonics, our daily phonics teaching. However, within anything in phonics, if it's relevant, You can incidentally make children aware of things that are outside of the program as they are working. So if I give you an example, in reception, you might be doing the story of the gingerbread man. And you've done the OA, as it says in the program for O, and children can read words like soak, boat, float. But you're doing the gingerbread man and you want to do a recipe and you're writing about the dough. You will bring children's attention to the fact that this time dough is spelled O-U-G-H. They might not all remember that, and that's okay, but you won't pretend it's spelled with an O-A. When you're teaching, we teach all the words that we choose will match the pattern that we are using, but children will notice and you will want to point out where this is not always the case. This is our incidental teaching, and it is additional to and can be different from the program that we follow. So now I'd like to come back to these split digraphs. On the page where we thought about all the different ways to spell the sound A, one of the words on there was cake. So I want to have a look at the phonemes in cake. So we can hear k, a, k in cake. When you were at school, you might have learnt this as magic E. They used to say if magic E is on the end of the word, it makes the sound in the middle say its name. This is no longer good practice. This isn't what's happening. They are one grapheme that has been split apart representing one phoneme. That is how we should teach it. I'm going to show you why. So in this word, we have got the phonemes p, I. The p is represented by the single letter P, and the I is represented by the digraph IE. Now let's have a look what happens if we split that digraph. Just going to move the E over there, but they're still connected. They're like friends holding hands, but somebody's come to stand in the middle. So when we read the word I, pine, this is a split digraph. So having a think now about alternative pronunciations. As I said at the beginning, English is irregular in that one spelling pattern can represent multiple different phonemes, and one phoneme can be represented by multiple different spelling patterns. We've just seen in the long vowel families how one phoneme can be represented by multiple different spellings. Now we're going to have a look at how one spelling pattern can represent multiple different phonemes. I wonder whether you can think how many different ways there are of pronouncing that digraph. Okay, hopefully you got ch like in chip. You might have also got k like in school, school, school. It is a k in that word. And sh like in chef. It makes the sh in that word. So here's another example. The letter A. We already talked about how the letter A could be pronounced as an A, like in cat. Cat, cat. We also talked about how it could be an A. The word we looked at before was apron. Here's another example. Baby. B-A, B-E, baby. It can also be an O, like in was. O-Z. So we have to know that different letters, single letters, digraphs, can represent more than one phoneme. This can make reading complex for children. Let's have a look at some examples. When reading a word, we might have to try more than one different way of pronouncing the phoneme. So if I was a child and I saw this word, I might read it k, l, o, n, clone. And I might be quite happy with that because clone is a real word. but it might not make sense. If there's a picture of a man in big trousers and a red ball on his nose, and I read clone, I'm probably not going to be very happy with my reading of it. In which case, I need to come back and have another go at this. So I'm now going to have a try with the other way I know of reading this digraph. Ow, clown. I'm much happier with clown if I've got the picture of the man with the big trousers. Now, this can cause some problems because if it's an unknown word to the child and they don't know the meaning of the word, they might be quite happy to accept the first reading of it. They might try all the different readings of it they know, and they might not get a real word out of it that they know. In which case they will need your help because they don't know the meaning of the word. Now, the other thing to be aware of is that for some words, there will be some slight tweaking required. Let's have a look at this word. O, L, D, gold. That doesn't sound right. I'm going to have another go at this letter. G, O, L, D, gold. So gold and gold don't sound quite right because we pronounce it as gold. This is to do with accent, and it's a slight variation on how we pronounce the L. But so long as children know that some slight tweaks might be required, we're not guessing, we're not changing, but slight tweaks might be required to help us read a word. So, as I said at the beginning, English is irregular in both directions. One spelling pattern can represent multiple different phonemes, but also one phoneme can have multiple different spellings. We already had a look at this with our long vowel families, but it's also true with many of our consonants. So the sound ch can be spelt with a ch, like in chairs, or it can be spelt with a tch, like in patch. Now you will know that tch would never come at the beginning of a word, but you need to make that explicit to children. Where do they use ch? Where do they use tch? Where do they never use tch? How do they know whether to use ch or tch at the end of a word, rich or patch? How do they know? Here we are with j, which can be spelt with a j, like in jug, a ge, like in cabbage, a g on its own, like in gerbil, giraffe, or gymnast. And you can see there the letters grayed out. Those letters that follow are not part of the spelling pattern. It's to help you see that there's a rule there, that G on its own at the beginning of a word will make a J sound if it's followed by E, I, or Y, not if it's followed by A, O, or U. It could also be spelt with DGE, like in fridge. Your job as the teacher is to help children know which of those spelling patterns they use in which positions and how they know which ones never go in which positions, which ones always go in certain positions. If there are multiple different ones that can go in the same position, GE or DGE at the end of a word, how do they know which one to go for? More on this in a different video. So let's have a look at the progression. Phonics can be used to read pretty much all words, but as words start to get longer, then there are other things we need to do rather than just saying every single letter. But let's have a look at the progression from the beginning. As we talked about before, the simplest words to read have got two letters that represent two sounds, a vowel and a consonant. Then words that have got three letters that represent three sounds. Then words that have got four letters that represent three sounds, or possibly digraphs where we've got four letters that represent three sounds. It starts to get harder when we have adjacent consonants. So in sips, the ps can be hard to hear. In slip, the sl can be hard to hear. And some words in English have got three adjacent consonants at the beginning. These can be quite hard for children. This is a complex word. Strip. We shouldn't teach it as a block. So we don't teach str words. We teach them as individual phonemes to be blended together, but we recognise that blending 3 adjacent consonants is hard. This gets harder when we add in another digraph somewhere else in the word, because it's more complexity for children to notice. Or we might have something like a split digraph. We might have more than one digraph. And here's a case where you have to tweak it a little bit. Springer. And then we start getting on to longer words that have more than 4 or 5 phonemes in. Once we get to words that might have 6 phonemes in, we don't really want children to say each sound, because for many of them this will be longer than their working memory and they will have forgotten what they said at the beginning. So now we start needing to use syllables. So this needs to be made explicit to children in your modelling, and it needs to be encouraged in their reading, and it needs to be encouraged in their spelling. But we read and spell syllable by syllable once words get long. So let's have a look at sun, and have a syllable break. We've got the first part, sun. Set. The beginning was sun, the end was set. The word says sunset. Let's have a look at this one. Now you will need to guide children where syllables end. Children won't be able to see them as easily as you, so they might read that as carp, arc. You want to guide them to car, park, car. There's my syllable break. Arc, park. The beginning was car, the end is park. The word says car park. Here we are. Flow. It's my syllable break. Flower. There's a syllable break. Flowering. And again, you'll notice that there was a slight tweak. We say flower, we say flowering, and the R runs into the I and we stress the These are slight tweaks that with practice, children will be able to hear. Let's have a look at this word. Exactly the same process, even though the word is really long. A. There's my syllable break. Nay. B. Or. There's my syllable break. Neighbor. Hood. Neighborhood. Okay, so to finish, I'd like to come back to this Scarborough reading rope. We've focused on the word recognition part, recognising that language comprehension is important, but that's separate from phonics. We've looked at the phonics strand, which is just part of learning to read. Let's have a look at that more closely. So we had a look at phonological awareness. These were the pre-reading and pre-spelling skills that I talked to you about. Particularly, we focused today on oral blending and oral segmenting. We also looked at decoding. This is phonics. This is, as you can see, they've called it the alphabetic principle. I called it the alphabetic code. They've called it spelling sound correspondence. I called it phoneme grapheme correspondence, plus blending, plus segmenting. The part we have not looked at today is this, sight recognition. And this is a really important part that I'm going to be covering in another video. All 3 aspects of word recognition need to be taught and need to be part of phonics as part of that word recognition strand of learning to read.